Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our Bible study. We are in Genesis chapter 40 today. We're making some good progress. And if you want the free PDF that comes along with the study, you can download it on our website. There's a link down in the description below. It's free, as are all of the handouts for our 5-minute studies. When did the events of chapter 40 take place? Well, we know that Joseph was 17 years old when his brothers sold him into slavery in Egypt. That would be approximately 1728 BC. He was around 28 years old when the events of this story happened, so about 11 years later. In terms of our main characters, we have Joseph. He was the son of Jacob and Rachel, and his brothers hated him because he was his father's favorite, and that's how he got to Egypt. His brothers sold him into slavery. And then we have two characters that are unique to chapter 40, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker of Pharaoh. These were officers of Pharaoh's who had their dreams interpreted while they were in prison with Joseph. And just like last chapter, as far as our where, this took place in the country of Egypt, but we don't know any specifics as to the region or to the specific city. In terms of our outline, in our first section, verses 1 through 8, we're introduced to Pharaoh's chief cupbearer and his chief baker. So sometime after Joseph was thrown into prison, Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker were thrown into prison because they committed some kind of offense against the king of Egypt. The keeper of the prison, because he trusted Joseph, put him in charge of attending to these guys while they were there. And one night, both the cupbearer and the baker had dreams, and they were really troubled because they couldn't figure out the interpretation of their dreams. Joseph told them that God was the interpreter of dreams, and he asked them to recount their dreams to him. The cupbearer's dream is recorded in verses 9 through 15. So the chief cupbearer dreamed that there was a vine, and this vine had 3 branches, and it bloomed, and clusters of grapes grew from it. He was standing nearby with Pharaoh's cup in his hand. So he took the grapes, he pressed them, filled the cup with juice, and then gave the cup to Pharaoh. God revealed the interpretation of the dream to Joseph. He told the cupbearer that the 3 branches represented 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh was going to reinstate him to his old job as cupbearer, and he would be honored. Now, when Joseph told him the interpretation of the dream, he asked the cupbearer to remember him when he was honored by Pharaoh and to mention Joseph to Pharaoh so that maybe Pharaoh could do something to get him out of prison because he didn't do anything wrong to get himself there in the first place. So the baker's dream and its interpretation are up next in verses 16 through 19. When the baker heard the interpretation of the cupbearer's dream and saw that it was favorable, he wanted his dream interpreted as well. He told Joseph that he had dreamed that there were 3 cake baskets on his head, and in the top basket there were all these baked goods that had been prepared for Pharaoh. But the birds came along and ate those goods that were in the top basket. Joseph told him that the 3 baskets represented 3 days, and in 3 days Pharaoh would hang the chief baker, and the birds would come and eat his flesh. And so then in our last section, verses 20 through 23, we have the fate of the cupbearer and the baker. 3 days after Joseph had given this interpretation, Pharaoh's birthday arrived, and he held a feast. He summoned the cupbearer and the baker from prison. He reinstated the cupbearer to his old job, and he hung the baker just as Joseph had predicted, or as God revealed to him. Unfortunately, though, the chief cupbearer forgot about Joseph, and he forgot to mention him to Pharaoh, and so Joseph remained in prison. And so that is Genesis chapter 40. Now let's talk about our application. Ingratitude is a terrible sin. An ungrateful heart is not a godly heart. It's pretty hard to believe that the cupbearer forgot about Joseph. But have you ever forgotten about people who have helped you the most in your times of trouble and your times of difficulty in your past? When you finally rise up out of that trouble, have you forgotten to go back and to thank them for what they've done? Or to return that same favor maybe to somebody else? Have you ever been ungrateful to the people who raised you? Maybe to those who have poured so much of their time into you and those who have helped you during your lowest points. Our goal through these 5-minute studies is to understand the scriptures better so that we understand God better. But somebody who's ungrateful will never understand the Bible because you'll never appreciate God's greatest gift to you, and that is Jesus. So if you're ungrateful, stop it and start being more grateful.